All right. Sorry about the delay, folks. Teams, you gotta love these video conferencing tools. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me just share my screen here really quick. All right. So thank you all for joining our webinar today. My name is Rob Iannicello. I'm the head of global sales here at Conceal. I've got the honor of being the moderator today for today's fireside chat. We're joined here today. We'll do introductions in just a second, but our partner Solis, our technology partner SentinelOne, and we've got our SVP of product and biz dev, Craig. We've got a great fireside chat ready for you guys today. Agenda is quick introductions. I'm going to turn it over to Craig just to do a high level on what is the better together story between SentinelOne and Conceal. And then we're going to go to a bit of a fireside chat, and then we're going to cap things off with an actual demonstration of SentinelOne working with Conceal. So with that being said, if you have any questions at all throughout the chat, please drop them in the chat. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. If we miss any, we'll definitely follow up after the webinar. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists today, starting with the top right of my screen, Shante over at Solis. Tell us a bit about who you are, what you do at Solis, who Solis is, and if we're lucky, maybe a little fun fact about yourself.
Awesome. Yes, my name is Shante Perrin. I'm director of our proactive services team at Solis Security. So that essentially means managing the team of our managed services, which ranges from, normal SOC monitoring to vulnerability management, firewall management, all of our monthly services. So it's been great being at Solis. Fun fact about me, I live in the state of Georgia, in the city of Augusta, where we house the normal Masters golf tournament. So if you're a golf fan, that's where I reside, born and raised. So thank you.
Well, I just learned something new today, Shante. Thank you. We're actually headquartered in Augusta, Georgia. So next time I'm at headquarters, I'll be sure to drop by and see you. Thank you. Awesome. Great. Scott, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Scott Rich. I am with SentinelOne, been with SentinelOne for nearly 6 years. Before that, I was at Microsoft, been in security a very, very long time, over 20 years now. And let's see, fun fact about me, I am an avid golfer, and I am playing in a state championship that I qualified for this weekend, as a matter of fact, for the Veterans Golf Association. So wish me luck.
Good luck, and I see you getting out to Augusta in your near future with Shante and I. So
I can only hope.
Awesome, thank you, Craig. Why don't you cap us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Craig Whetstone. I'm our SVP of Product and Business Development here at Conceal. I've been with the company for about 9 months. Before that, I've been a number of different roles in OEM sales, business development, and security for about the last 10 years. Overall software, almost 30 years now. Fun fact about me, so I live in Folsom, California, which you may be familiar with just through the Johnny Cash song and Folsom Prison Blues. So I'm an avid paddleboarder. I paddle up the river where you can see the towers of the prison, and there's an actual sign across the river that says you can't go any further, signed the warden. So anyhow, that's a little bit about the town I live in. Thanks.
Appreciate that. No, that's great. I'm glad I asked the fun fact piece there. So with that said, Craig, since you were just talking, before we jump into a bit of a fireside chat, talk to us a little bit about what is the better together story. Why SentinelOne plus Conceal? What does that mean to anybody on the webinar today?
Sure. Yeah, and it's been great to work with SentinelOne as a partner in our technology alliances. We, as a browser extension, we can create a lot of interesting telemetry. We'll talk a little bit more about this in terms of the way we detect and what we can share out into with our customers. But we got a lot of requests early on from customers who said, "Hey, I've got endpoint detect response solution, in this case SentinelOne, and I'd like to see an integration where we can start to bring in some of the insight and telemetry that the browser extension can provide into SentinelOne Singularity, so that can be actioned on. It can be brought in really as another event stream into the Singularity data lake. And so I think from a better together story, one of the challenges that any EDR solution has is really detecting web-based threats. Most of the industry has been focused on using threat intelligence and trying to detect phishing or other web threats at the network layer or on the host. But even on the host, you're really depending on things like the DNS lookup, network level, let's just call that visibility to the activity of the user. And so by adding in Conceal, the way Conceal works is really we're sitting right next to the user in the browser. We see everything that the user sees from their vantage point. And we look for any evidence of any malicious patterns as these websites load, as the user engages with them. And we base our detections on what we observe from the point of view of the user. And this becomes more important as users start to, or attackers start to use more sophisticated methods of attack. For example, we had an attack recently that we observed where the user was prompted to work through a number of different stages of the attack. The user was sent an email, they clicked the link, that link took them into Box. Box presented a PDF document that they opened. That PDF document looked to the user like a Microsoft OneDrive login, and kind of weird, but once they clicked through that, they went to a malicious SSO login for Microsoft. And when this was reported to us, the user reported it. We went to that site, the endpoint, which is basically that SSO login, and it was immediately redirected to Wikipedia. So unless you went through all those steps to engage with that attack pattern, the attack wouldn't show its stripes. And so we think that our value is really based on being able to observe from the user's point of view exactly what's happening within the browser, and then look for those malicious attack patterns as they show their stripes, versus trying to come in and really look at the communication patterns, being the DNS request or some network level behavior that would be more difficult to detect that type of attack, because typically you're having to go out with threat intelligence, scrape sites, bring that intelligence back into the product, and then you're really looking for a lookup, right? A signature of this site is bad based on an IP or a URL, a domain, etc. So by adding this capability in to the EDR, we open up the visibility that the EDR has. So SentinelOne can now see what we see within the browser. We can share that telemetry with our mutual customers, and it can be actioned very effectively, because that's what EDRs do really, really well, right? EDRs, once you are in that response mode, they're able to isolate, quarantine, and Scott can talk a little bit more about that. But really, those capabilities are ones that we don't have because we don't sit on the host. We're sitting within the browser. So it's very complementary. We expand the visibility of the EDR, and then the EDR can kind of enforce a lot more action on the host level.
That's great. And you know what? I might veer off course a little bit here. Shante, I did want to start with you, but I'm going to come right back to you. I'm going to jump ahead to, I want to talk a little bit. I mean, Craig, so you were at Cylance in the early days, right? And Scott, obviously, been at SentinelOne. Let's talk a bit about the evolution, not only EDR, but let's go back. Like, first it was AV, and then we had next gen AV, and now we've got EDR. Can you talk a bit about that evolution from your viewpoint, what you've seen over the years, and maybe fast forward to today, where do some of those gaps still lie, where EDR is at the moment in present time?
Sure, I can start, and Scott, you can happy to have you jump in. So 8-10 years ago, the AV industry was pretty much all signature based, right? And so in order to detect something malicious, you have had to have seen it before, and really that's where we are today with a lot of these web-based threats. And what changed the game was the ability for companies like, I was at Cylance. You've got other companies, obviously, like SentinelOne, that have now continued to evolve that whole approach, but looking for ways to detect maliciousness without having to rely on a signature. And so that's really where I think we are today with this product, is that we can detect maliciousness without a signature. We're not having to rely on having had seen that before. And it really changes the game, because now you can detect things that are new. And especially with phishing, these sites live a matter of hours. These attacks happen and they're very targeted. The attacker closes down and moves on if they're not successful, or even if they are successful, they'll close down and move on. And we see this all the time when we do research. By the time that these sites show up on a threat intel feed, they're already taken down. So it's really all about, how do I detect net new? How I detect kind of that new pattern of attack, and that's what we're really focused on here at Conceal.
Yeah, and to kind of reiterate what Craig was talking about, it really shows how important it is to have a layered security approach, especially in this day and age. I mean, for those of you that have been around a while, like I have, back in the day, it was install an AV, you're done. Then after that, it was you get yourself a firewall and you're done. And then there was additional tools that started to become, available, such as the EDRs and sandboxing and things like that. But like Craig was talking about, all of these solutions were hinged on the idea that you've seen this type of attack before. So, and the EDRs, while really great at detecting malware and exploits, doing forensic investigations, things like that quickly and rapidly, where we've had a continuous blind spot, and not just with SentinelOne, but with other EDR vendors as well. And I think that everybody should be, pretty confident in admitting that, is browser activity, especially in seeing things that haven't been seen before. And also being, relying on a firewall within the last 4 years with the increase in remote work, especially, these types of solutions just really aren't as effective at stopping the credential harvesting, the phishing, and the introduction of malicious software through browser or even through browser extensions. And this is why that partnership between Solis and Conceal and SentinelOne has become so effective and necessary.
Yes, exactly. And I think the really key part to that, like you said, these attacks aren't just based on signatures anymore. It's more about the activity that's taking place, right? And even if there's human-based activity that's taking place that might not be successful yet, if there's hands on keyboard, the mistyping of certain characters. So looking at that human behavior is definitely important to our SOC and our team.
That's awesome. Great answers. Appreciate that. So Shante, I'm actually going to come back to you now. So Solis, you guys, I think, respond to, I don't know, hundreds of incident response cases a year. And from my perspective, I feel like you guys are really at the tip of the spear of having visibility into what the latest techniques, tactics, and procedures, the TTPs, are that these threat actors are employing to try to breach, all these organizations. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, like, what are you guys observing right now? What is the major causes of breaches, and what are you guys seeing from your lens?
Yeah, so what we try to protect against most is human activity, right? And I say, protecting the humans from the humans. But for that same reason, threat actors, they've used some more unique social engineering techniques to, get that user to click on that email, to do those extra steps. We've even seen, say, suspicious threat actor, sends an email with a link to OneDrive with the password to get to that OneDrive, which is a valid URL. It's not a malicious site necessarily, but the file inside is malicious and they download that as well. But when it comes to, those tactics where they're, manipulating URLs and the data in front of the user, I find that's where Conceal is very powerful for us. It allows us to see, what the user sees, right? Because if we could take that same URL, the user passes it to us or we download the intel information, we could load that URL in our sandbox, and that URL very well could display differently because the threat actor has determined this is sandbox activity. We don't want to show what's really there, right? We might just throw in a typed out 404 message and make it appear differently. But the other thing the threat actor would look out for as well is if for that URL, if it's loaded into a open source threat intel source, right? So if they place that URL